Recaps and redistricting. Oh my, there is enough to tackle with my next guests, more than enough. They are our insiders, of course, two guys who have logged a lot of hours in Albany, more than they would probably care to admit, so we will not hold them to it. Steve Greenberg is a pollster for the Siena Research Institute, and before his current gig, he served as press secretary to two former Assembly speakers. And of course, Dave Catalfamo is a partner at Capital Public Strategies. Many moons ago, he served as communications director for then Governor George Pataki. Some days you're gonna get me back for this. I know, many moons. Anyway, thank you for joining me, both of you. There's actually some late breaking news today, which it gives us a lot of extra stuff to talk about that we weren't quite expecting. We did expect, let's get this one out of the way, LIFO, which is last in, first out. I think we expected it to pass the Senate, and it did. It was narrow, 33-27. Without those breakaway IDC members, those renegade Democrats, would not have happened. This is a New York City only bill. I asked Senator Flanagan if it was a gift to Mayor Bloomberg, and he said no, but I still think so. Dave?
I think it's an important bill. I think it's one that, while municipalities and around the state, and I wish it were for the entire state, are looking to manage workforces, in particular public education, that they have the opportunity to move out teachers who have criminal problems or are not performing or just simply not meeting the grade, while other teachers who are performing should be able to stay. So giving that flexibility, I think, is very important. It's a good thing.
Dennis Hughes of the AFL-CIO characterized this as Wisconsin-type governing. In Wisconsin, of course, as we all know, there's a major battle going on there with the public employee unions. Is that a fair characterization?
I think it's a little hyperbolic, but we're in the midst of Albany and lobbying on both sides of the issue, so hyperbole is sort of the norm here. But I think it's also interesting that the governor joined the discussion today by late this afternoon as well, putting out a press release saying that he's introducing a program bill to do it statewide, to use the standards that were brought in, or at least partly use the standards that were brought in last year's legislation for Race to the Top funds for New York to get additional education money from Washington. Look, it's an issue that has to be addressed. It doesn't have to be addressed as part of the budget, and I think doing that probably makes it harder to actually get it done.
You know, before we came on air, we were actually having a conversation that's pretty fascinating, so I'm going to bring it up here. It is that some of the editorial boards, particularly the downstate ones like the New York Post, which is really, really hot for this issue, is suggesting if the legislature won't pass it, and we don't know what the Assembly will do, as we've said on numerous occasions, close to the teachers' union, the Assembly Democrats are, just throw it in the budget bill when there's no budget deal and force the legislature to pass it through an extender. You don't think that's a good idea?
It's disturbing, actually. And I've been reading these editorials, and I'm all for last in, first out, and I think it's good policy, and I give a lot of credit to Senator Flanagan and Senator Skelos and the Republicans for moving it forward. But this notion that we're going to jam every policy issue through these emergency extender bills or through an April 1 deadline is taking Pataki v. Silver a bridge too far. And if they were policies that these editorial boards weren't for, they would be screaming dictatorship. And so would a lot of other people. And I think there needs to be some caution and some common sense about what we're doing here.
Well, part of the problem probably, and you can speak to this, is that the poll numbers for the legislature are just in the toilet.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the poll numbers for the governor are through the roof, and the poll numbers for the legislature are below the basement. And so there is no problem for these editorial boards and for other leaders who are looking for things that they want to bash the legislature and to jump on the issue and demand that the governor include it in the budget.
But why is that? And why that is because we see these this very fascinating and very clever budget approach that the governor has adopted that's basically neutralized a lot of interest groups, and everybody's afraid to come forward.
Well, it is David Paterson's biggest legacy. We really should say that. I mean, he gets a lot of bad rap, right? He had a really rocky tenure, and he had a difficult end, and he had a lot of things that you could say, and he was not prepared. However, this was genius. It really was.
But it's only genius you have a legislature that is afraid to say no.
Well, the legislature no, Dave, they shut down the government, and we see that the federal government's not going to do that.
They tell the executive to promptly send them a bill that extends state government services as they are until they can get a deal that is appropriate and is reached on the basis.
That's political chicken.
Well, why is it just the one side? I mean, again, we don't live in a unilateral government here where the legislature doesn't have any rights. The governor needs to negotiate with the legislature on a package and not just take what the New York Post says and put it in a bill and send it along.
But what we've developed over the last decade is we've taken a strong governor and made the strong governor even stronger.
Right.
So that the governor really has, if not all the cards, 50 out of the 52 cards in his hand. And it makes it very difficult for the legislature. I think we've gone too far between the court decision that you referenced, Silver v. Pataki, and what Governor Paterson did yesterday. I mean, or last year, I agree with David. This notion that executives just jam things in the budget that they want and leave it for the legislature, all or nothing,
Well, then you know what's
is
gonna
not a
happen?
real good way
It's
to
going to
get
get settled in the courts. I mean, if in fact, because it seems to me that you're setting budget policy with Silver v. Pataki, that's set budget policy. If you suggest that there needs to be a reset, that there either needs to be some kind of agreement between the executive and legislative branches, which I can't imagine is going to happen, or they're going to go to court and it probably be
There's nothing
upheld.
to go to court over.
Why can't there be an agreement?
It's established
Because
law.
there's always been push-pull between those two
Of course
branches
there
of
is.
government.
But I mean, look, it's hard slogging. I mean, you know, and we've talked about this 1,000 times, and governors say it all the time. It's better to have a good budget than one that's on time,
Right,
and all this nonsense. But the reality is that people deserve an honest debate of these issues. And you see, an iteration of John Flanagan's bill. He put an initial bill. He got some feedback. It became a better bill. He said that himself on LIFO. So why is it that a process where the governor and the legislature go back and forth and come up with a better bill is a bad
Okay,
thing?
well, let's talk about that because it segues very nicely into the next topic, which is the Medicaid redesign report, right? It came out last week. It was very heralded by the governor. He said it was just amazing and it was extraordinary because what he had done really was neutralize these two major budget players. You guys know all too well the Pataki administration was a victim of 1199 and Greater New York Hospital Association major air wars, and they took you down. Poll numbers, they took you down almost all the way, very, very far. So he's very pleased. However, there are other people who are not so pleased. They weren't at the table. We've talked to them, some of them on this show, and they're saying, okay, wait a minute, hold on, whoa, we're going to go to the legislature. We're not thrilled with this. And what's the response? The response by the Cuomo administration is to come out attacking. When Blair Horner said something negative about MedMal, about the deal on medical malpractice, they came out and called him the mouthpiece for the trial lawyers. Now, there's no negotiation available there. That doesn't sound like debate and small d democracy.
No, but there will be debate. Look, I mean, first of all, we've got to see how this report gets written up in 2 days and included in the governor's 30-day amendments.
Right.
And so we actually see budget language rather than press releases. But secondly, the legislature does have the opportunity to debate it. Now, what I think is beyond debate, and I think where the governor deserves political credit, is he neutralized he neutralized 1199 in Greater New York and Haney's. But what he hasn't done is written in stone policies that the legislature can't tinker with. They have the ability to play with it as long as they keep the numbers there.
Right.
I mean, the governor, I don't think, really cares so much about what's in the report or what's in the budget as long as it meets his dollar threshold.
But we're saying it's brilliant, and from the point of view that
Politically,
politically, but really, if you go through it and you look at, he took 1199 off the table by giving them a path to membership to the union for 35,000 plus home care workers in New York City and elsewhere. He gave living wage, which there's not even an estimate on what that's going to cost the healthcare system. So, and at the end of the day, it's still old-fashioned sort of political bartering that basically got 1199 to not go out and beat the hell
He
out
preserves his
of them.
poll numbers in the process, right?
Absolutely.
And he preserves, and more importantly, his position of strength with the legislature, because I think the legislature is terrified of him.
Absolutely. And look, you know, right now the public is behind him, even when they disagree with him, whether it's on the extending the tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers or cuts in education, even when they disagree with him on specifics, they're with him on the total package.
Yeah, so I think that politically, though, you have to, I mean, and he was quite clear about it. He was quite clear about bringing these guys to the table, and they were actually quite clear about being pleased to have been there. They came out quite well. But they also said, you know, it's exhausting to do these kind of hand-to-hand combat sort of situations every single year. The contrast, though, between the Medicaid plan that we saw last week with all this bells and whistles and fanfare, and it was a Red Room press conference, which we don't see all that much of yet. He's only been in since January 1st. Is pretty stark in comparison to what we saw come out today, which was the mandate relief report, which came out online and doesn't have all that much in it. It's sort of a work in progress.
And the governor nor the governor's press release were surrounded by all the participants in the process.
Right.
You've had guests on here talking about how they didn't know what was going to be in this final mandate or this initial mandate report. Well, one, there wasn't a whole lot in there to begin with, but two, the governor did this by himself, as you said, with a press release. It wasn't like he did a press conference. It wasn't like he had association of counties or mayors or town officials with him.
Well, they were on it, but it met only 3 times.
But they weren't in the press release.
No.
They didn't say anything about this, as opposed to the press conference on Medicaid that was led by Michael Dowling, a hospital president.
Right. Right, and a former Mario Cuomo administration official.
Sure.
I mean, the mandate relief thing, here's the problem, and where it gets a little sticky. We have had, again, on this show, and numerous people, school officials and local government officials saying, okay, we're terrified of the property tax cap, and it needs to go hand in hand with mandate relief. What it looks like, the report, shies away with from some of the difficult things, like Triborough Amendment, like the Taylor Law, et cetera, and talks about, well, no more unfunded mandate going forward. Well, that's fabulous, but that doesn't give anybody relief in this moment, and I don't know that elected officials, whom we haven't heard from yet on this, are going to feel comfortable with 2% property tax cap going forward.
They're not going to be happy. I mean, you know, there's no way that they can be happy because there isn't enough in here to give them any quality assurance that they can control spending on a local level. And when you couple that with, you know, and they do go hand in hand with what you see in the Medicaid report. I mean, I saw a cap on Medicaid growth at 4%. Is that 4% on top of the 3% the counties already have, or is that 4% including of the 3% they already have? So
We haven't seen the bill language.
we don't know the bill language, but it's actually really relevant to what we're, you know, to what we're. So you couple that with no real relief, and no matter what, it's bad for local governments. They got at least what they currently have, it looks like, so far as obligation, with no relief in sight.
I mean, there's talk in this mandate relief program of you know, letting the local governments apply for a waiver of specific relief. That's not broad. And Tier 6, a new pension tier for new employees coming in, that will be good long range, perhaps, fiscally for local governments and school boards, but it really doesn't give them any initial relief right now.
You know, I would be remiss, really, I think we all would be, if we didn't just talk briefly about Richard Daines and before we go, because we're going to run out of time. And he was on the show a lot. His death, of course, was a surprise. He's the former health commissioner. He died over the weekend. He was only 60. He was in really great health, and he was an unusually good public servant. And I think that everyone I have spoken to has said to me, you really should say something about him, about how he was just unusually dedicated, sort of the definition of what you think a public servant should be, and his passing is really untimely and I think very sad. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you guys knew him quite well. He was.
I didn't know him at all, but I knew a lot of people at the health department who, even if they didn't agree with him, couldn't say enough good about the man and his approach to the job, so far as, you know, his ethics and his belief in the policies that he put forward, and just had a lot of respect of people who I know and respect, and obviously very sad for his family.
Very sad, no question.
Well, but it also speaks to something, which is that, you know, people come to government, as much as we like to talk about how much money people make in government, et cetera, it's really not a place to get rich, and it is a place that a lot of people, as much as we talk on the show about the bad things that they do or they're not measuring up, et cetera, there are a lot of people who are working really very hard, so certainly we should probably
And Dr.
know
Daines
that.
took a pay cut to come work as health commissioner. He was the president of a hospital down in New York City.
Yep, he did. And there are some people who aren't getting paid at all because they are at a point in their lives where they don't need to. So I just wanted to note that because I knew him, I covered him, and I thought he was a great guy. So I want to thank you very much now that I've bummed everyone out. Steve Greenberg, thank you. And Dave Kertelfmo, thank you very much